Serious, people who have survived a murder attempt by dumb luck. What's your story? Mine's not extreme by any chance, but a couple of years ago my brother and I went to walk the dog at like 11 PM. We left through the side gate, live on a corner, and right as we exit I see this weird looking dude at the corner of the footpath walking weirdly towards us. Got bad vibes and told my brother to get the dog and get back inside. This dude is walking kind of side on and hiding something in his hand behind his back. As I'm getting my brother through the gate, the dude says something like, "Oh, mate, can I come in? I need a blanket, I'm freezing." I just ignored him and went inside and locked the door. We then get a call from the people who live 2 doors up. The same dude knocked on their door and their 10-year-old son opened it to see the dude holding a ducking hatchet. Anyway, I'm glad I went with my gut on that one. I was 14 and outside in my garage petting my cat. It was November, so it was already dark by 5 PM. Someone opened the door behind me without me hearing, grabbed me by my ponytail and starting dragging me outside. They hit me on my head with a brick and knocked me out. Pulled me halfway around my house when, I'm guessing this is when, they stabbed me on the left side of my stomach. This must have brought me out of my daze, because my mom said she heard me scream from inside where she and my brother and sister were in the kitchen. They came out the front door and saw me bleeding out on the sidewalk. Called 911. Had 12 stitches, double layer, a severe concussion, and whiplash. Didn't eat and hardly slept for a week. They never found them. Edit. Somehow believed for nearly 14 years I was 15 when this happened. Turns out I was 14. Edited to correct. Second edit. Thank you so much for my first gold. O circumflex Y with diaresis copyright airing. Well, my mom got mad at me when I was 20 and I didn't give her money for her birthday, which I'm assuming was to pay off drug dealers of hers. So she stabbed me between the ribs. Ended up getting stuck in the bone and had to get it taken out in surgery. If you're from the area I'm from, this will probably sound familiar, but I got absolutely blackout drunk at an end of the year graduation party and ended up having to get taken home early. Later that night another student at the party ended up stabbing and killing 5 people. Turns out he had mental issues, schizophrenia, and thought everyone at the party was a werewolf vampire who threatened his life. He never went to jail but ended up being found non-criminally responsible instead. I was riding in a train across Eastern Europe. I was running low on money, and even though I had been warned that a woman should not travel alone in second class seating, I did not spring for first class. I was sitting alone in one of the compartments that seats 6. This was also a mistake and a very stupid one to sit alone. Eventually the train stopped and a man got on. He was very drunk. He came into my compartment and I guess thought I looked like his ex-wife. He attacked me. If it were not for the fact that this particular station was the border between 2 countries, I would be dead. Instead, border patrol from both countries were on the train, and while I was unable to scream, the door was open and at least a half a dozen uniformed men jumped him and saved me. I was in the hospital for a little while but recovered. At one point during the trial, one of the cops asked me if I wanted him and his buddies to hold the guy down while I hit him. I thought he was joking, so I said no. Go ahead, you do it. I was also joking, but it turns out they took it seriously and were about to. I did put a stop to that at least, but they were so offended that someone from their country would attack a young female American tourist. They were furious with him. So many people there depended upon tourism. My sister had this one friend when we were growing up I always got a bad vibe from. She would try to pick on my little brother but I would always stop her. I was 8. She was 10. Once we were at a lake and all the kids were swimming. I swam out to the deep roped off part but I was still little and really shouldn't have. She kept acting weird and getting closer to me, making this weird laugh. She pushed me off the wooden pole in the water and I got scared and started to swim back, but she came up behind me and pushed me under the water. It didn't click at first that she was trying to drown me, but after she aggressively pushed me under the 3rd time I had this crazy moment of clarity. It was like the world slowed down ever so briefly. I relaxed and let myself sink, swam underneath her, and came up behind her. I grabbed her hair and shoved her face into the water, keeping my legs on her back so her body couldn't rise. I waited until her struggling slowed down and let her come up. I waited in the water saying nothing. bracing myself for her retaliation, but she just looked panicked and swam back to shore. I told my sister, who had already expressed that the girl was weird. We confronted her together and she just looked really dazed. In a monotone voice she said, "I'm sorry. I didn't know it would be like that." It wasn't until I replayed those words in my mind later that I realized what she was saying was, "Sorry, I tried to drown you." It wasn't until I was almost drowned myself that I realized how horrible it is to do to someone. My supposed best friend decided that my wife and I were too perfect. Therefore it must all be an act, and I was obviously abusing her. He was at our house after I made an awesome dinner and we were having fun drinking and singing karaoke. I went to the kitchen to put some glasses away, came back and leaned on the couch with him slightly behind me to the left of me. Then I heard a thunk and felt an amazing amount of pain on the top of my head. He had picked up the whiskey bottle on the table and smashed it into my skull. I was very confused as to WTF was happening. Then the blood started pouring. I didn't want to get blood everywhere, so I went to the kitchen. Dude is pacing back and forth saying, "Weird it." I thought about my gun, which was close by, but I wasn't thinking quite straight. He left. I had a huge concussion and still suffer side effects from it. My number 2 goal in life is to live longer than that a shat, just so I can it on his grave. This all happened many years ago. I was a lead man at a factory. A girl starts working there, and I take an interest. After a few months, I find out she is in a terrible drug-fueled abusive relationship. Every night, I tell her to call me. I'll come get her. Finally, after months, she calls me. I come get her and take her to my house. The guy she was in the relationship with didn't take too kindly to me taking her away. He spends the next 2 years harassing and threatening us. Few months after she and I got married, we went out for a few drinks. Her ex just happened to be at the bar we went to. He apologized to us for the threats and harassment. We were sitting outside talking with a few other people. Next thing I know, I'm on my back on the ground with someone choking me. I try all I can to get them off of me, but being blindsided and them being on top of me, it wasn't easy. As I struggle to get free, everything goes black. Then I see the light at the end of the tunnel. In that moment I was certain that this was the end of me. I somehow managed to get a better hold of this person's head, and I yank them off of me. We run to the car and get away. A week or so later, my wife had been talking to everyone she thinks might know what happened. Turns out, her ex had paid 2 people $50 to kill me that night. Chilling with a bros drinking at a park. As we drive off to leave, a car coming our way almost hits us. Driver obviously reacts like WTF, and I guess the other car noticed. They turned around and caught up to us at a stop sign. Other driver asked if we had a problem. We told them stop driving like assholes. Then their back window rolls down and 2 guys in the back draw Glocks with drum magazines. We just kind of froze up at first, but then our driver pulled off hastily. Later found out those guys got arrested for shooting someone else that same day. When I was 2 weeks into my first job as a 16-year-old, at a smoothie establishment that should be known to NBA fans, we were robbed. It was late, and my co-worker's friends had been playing pranks on her all day, so when I saw someone burst through the door, I thought it was just that, until, that is, I had something metal pressed against my back and an arm wrapped around my chest. The robber gave the whole stereotypical "give me all the money" spiel, and ordered us to go into the back room, kneel down, and face the wall. As I was kneeling and hearing him walking towards us, time seemed to slow down. Thankfully, I had been refilling juices whenever he came in, and so the door to the back room was partially blocked by a heavy cart with whatever substance he was on. He wasn't coordinated enough to get past it to us, so he fled. He was followed by my co-worker's husband and caught. When he was caught, they found an industrial-sized pipe wrench wrapped tightly in his fist, so that he could get a stronger grip when swinging. I'm so glad that cart was there. Once a year or so, I would look him up in the parish prison roster to see if he was still in jail. 1 year, he suddenly wasn't. I later found him named in a lawsuit as having stabbed his cellmate a half dozen times while the guy was asleep. Definitely doesn't seem like the nicest of people. 9 years later, I'm still unpacking this incident in therapy. It's why I don't like walking around cities at night or sitting where I can't see the door. I don't know if this counts because I didn't find out until 10 years later, when I was 7-8 years old. When my parents broke up, my dad apparently tried to kill me and my mother, along with everyone in the house all the time, including the cats. He failed to get in house the 2 times he tried. In my late teens, I used to buy my weed from random dudes in the projects, low-income housing. One day we gave some money to a guy named 40. He took it and went inside one of the buildings. We waited in the car for several minutes. We started to think he had taken our money and left. Right about that time, a car full of coked up white dudes pulled up beside ours. Apparently my friend owed them money. They pointed a gun at him and said that if he had enough money to buy weed, then he could pay them back. I really thought they were going to shoot us and just drive off like it was nothing. And I hadn't even done anything wrong. I thought I was gonna pee my pants. Right about that time, 40 came back out with our weed and an even bigger gun. He scared them away and then we went back to his apartment and smoked a blunt. What a good man. Turns out he was only selling weed because he had a 6-year-old daughter and that was the only way he knew to give her a better life than he had. I babysat his daughter occasionally for the rest of that summer. I really hope she got a decent childhood and that her dad stayed safe and out of jail. TLDR. Almost got shot but was saved by a random drug dealer who turned out to be a decent fellow. I was around 20-21 years old and walking home at about 3 AM after a night out and I was absolutely plastered from drinking so much. I was about 200 meters from my house when a hooded figure jumped out from behind a bush and immediately had a knife pushing into my stomach as he grabbed my neck and tried pulling me in. Fortunately I was stronger and pulled away. He went to lunge at me with the knife when suddenly he stopped. Stared for what felt like an eternity but was probably a second or two and then said, "Holy it race your spoon for. I haven't seen you in so long. My bad mate," and then walked off like nothing had happened. I still don't know who he was to this day. I was abducted at a gas station during undergrad. The locks on my car were broken. And as soon as I got back in, a strange man came in and forced me to drive him to an ATM. I am paralyzed with fear so any sense or reason I had went out the window. He claimed he worked at Wendy's and for my generosity he would give me all the Wendy's I ever wanted. On the way to the ATM he showed me pictures of his daughters on his clearly stolen cell phone. Then a Whitney Houston song came on the radio and he starts bawling his eyes out and screaming, "Why do all the good people have to die? Only bad things should happen to bad people." I go to the ATM, take out cash, give it to him thinking it's over. He then makes me get back in the car and drive him somewhere else. We pass by some train tracks and I'm thinking this is it. This is where I will be murdered. He asks me what I'm studying in school, and I tell him biochemistry. I believe in jet propulsion and all that it. We are not alone, aliens are among us. He then makes me pull over at a gas station and he tells me, "Drive away sweetheart." I call the cops. Had to do a lineup. Apparently this dude had done this to a ton of other women, and some were less unscathed than I was. I was 15-16. At a party, I went outside on a balcony for a smoke with someone I was talking to, and there was already a guy out there. We chatted as a group, and the friend went back inside. I started chatting with the guy who was already out there, who seemed a little funny. He started talking about how he was in the army for a little bit but got kicked out. Then pulled out a big knife and handed it to me. I looked at it and gave it back to him. At that point he pushed me against the edge of the balcony, put the knife to my neck, looked me in the eye, and said, "Do you know why I wanted to join the army? I wanted to duck and kill people, man. People just like you." He then made a slicing sound with his mouth and took the knife away, then started laughing. I went inside, grabbed my GF, and we locked ourselves in a bedroom. He ended up smoking a lot of meth that night and was kneeing holes in the wall and beating on the door. I slept with my knife under my pillow. The next morning he seemed totally normal, except for the fact that he had turned his jeans into short shorts. Ducking scary looking back on it. Edit. Originally put ages 14, but realized later it was closer to 15/16. Also, I found out later that the guy got kicked out in basic training. Well, IDK if this counts as an attempt or not, but my wife, My kids and myself went to church one time and we ran into one of my wife's old flings. This guy followed my wife around and our daughter and kept trying to talk to them. So I confronted him about it and told him to back off. As we were leaving he makes sure to yell across the parking lot telling my daughter goodbye. My wife forces me into the car and we leave. So I message the guy on Facebook to ask him what his problem is and he tells me that my wife and daughter are his friends and I have no right to tell them who to be friends with. I told him again to back off or I would call the police. Fast forward a week. I worked every other Sunday. I get a call from the pastor saying that they had to call the police on the guy because he was causing drama looking for me. When they arrested him he had a backpack with him that had a sawed-off shotgun, a meth pipe and some meth in it.